Hello, my name is Avon. My parents left my grandpa dying in the ICU while they flew to Hawaii. My mom smiled and said, "Better to spend money on paradise. He's not worth it." I stayed behind, alone, drained my savings, scrubbing hospital floors at night just to keep him breathing. But 5 years later, they returned, not to mourn, but to claim everything he owned. When the lawyer opened the will, my mother screamed, because Grandpa left more than money. He left the truth. Before we begin, what time is it where you're watching from? And has your family ever betrayed you like this? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If you ever asked my family to describe me, you'd likely receive an empty pause, followed by, "Oh, she's our youngest, Avon." Quiet, I suppose. As the youngest daughter, I was like wallpaper, always there, rarely noticed. It never really bothered me before, but standing in that dim hospital corridor, feeling the sterile coldness seep into my bones, invisibility wasn't merely hurtful, it was dangerous. The doctor's words still echoed painfully in my ears. "Less than 10% chance," he had said quietly, looking at us like he'd seen it all 1,000 times before. My grandfather, the only family member who ever made me feel truly seen, was hanging by the thinnest thread in the ICU. "We need a decision about treatment," he concluded solemnly. My mom, Celine, turned to my father, then glanced at my older sister, Bryn. "Did you hear that? Less than 10%, she scoffed softly, shaking her perfectly styled hair. "And for what? A few extra weeks?" My heart sank as she continued, "We've planned Hawaii for months. Paradise or chasing miracles here?" She raised an eyebrow, looking straight at me, as if daring me to object. My father and Bryn exchanged brief, uneasy glances, but stayed silent. They rarely opposed her. Who would? My mother was a force of nature wrapped in expensive silk. I opened my mouth, but no sound escaped. My heart screamed objections, protests. But my voice was paralyzed by years of practiced invisibility. And before I knew it, they had already started walking away down the hallway toward their waiting taxi and the carefree Hawaiian beaches. Nobody even turned around. Then it hit me. This wasn't a family decision. It was abandonment wrapped in rationalization. A nurse appeared suddenly, handing me a stack of paperwork. "Since your family left, you're the only one here. We need someone to assume financial responsibility, or we can't proceed." Panic tightened my chest. I hurried after my mother, pleading quietly, my voice shaking. "Mom, please. Grandpa needs us." She turned briefly, her eyes like cold marbles, not a flicker of warmth. "Stay if you want, Avon," she said flatly. "But don't ask us for a penny." And then, without hesitation, she left. They all left. My pulse raced. My future, my college savings, my security swirled in a whirlwind around me. I stood alone under fluorescent hospital lights, realizing the weight of their abandonment. Grandpa deserved better, and I knew I had to make the choice they wouldn't. I scribbled my name on every form, fingers trembling as I committed myself to whatever financial abyss lay ahead. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them back, determined to hold together. An hour later, I handed over nearly every dollar I'd saved from summer jobs, tutoring, and careful budgeting for my college tuition, now rerouted to keep Grandpa alive. Money drained and prospects shattered, I found myself begging for a janitorial position at the very same hospital. The supervisor, seeing my desperation, nodded sympathetically, handing me a mop and bucket. "Shift starts immediately." "Good luck." The rest of the night passed in a surreal blur of scrubbing floors and emptying trash cans. My muscles ached, hands blistered from unaccustomed work, but it was nothing compared to the emotional torment. Around midnight, exhaustion brought a strange kind of peace as I quietly slipped into Grandpa's room. I collapsed into the chair beside him. The machinery hummed and beeped rhythmically, a reminder he was still with me, for now. I reached out and took his hand gently in mine, feeling its fragile warmth. "I'm here," I whispered softly, tears finally falling unchecked. "I'm not going anywhere." He lay motionless, eyes closed, but just knowing I was near seemed to calm my racing heart. I leaned back in the chair, eyes heavy with fatigue, the sterile air lulling me into a semi-conscious state. That's when doubt seeped in, cold and unforgiving. Was I foolish? My family was sipping tropical drinks on pristine beaches without a care, and here I sat, exhausted, broke, clinging to hope. Maybe they were right. Maybe the responsible thing would have been letting him go. But Grandpa wasn't just a responsibility. He was the man who taught me the value of loyalty, the one person who noticed when I wasn't at the dinner table, who remembered my birthday without reminders, who listened quietly when I needed someone most. No, I couldn't walk away, not from him. I sat in silence, memories washing over me, our long walks in Balboa Park, his quiet chuckle as I stumbled over bike pedals when I was 6. He was always there for me. Now it was my turn to stay, to prove to both him and myself that family meant more than convenience or cost. Hours passed unnoticed. The world beyond our tiny hospital room ceased to exist. Around 3 in the morning, my exhaustion overtook my willpower. I drifted off, Grandpa's hand still cradled softly in mine. Suddenly, a harsh sound pierced my sleep. The monitor beside the bed screamed an urgent warning. My heart leaped into my throat, adrenaline flooding my veins. Nurses rushed in, pushing me gently aside, shouting rapid instructions to one another. I stood, helplessly watching them fight to stabilize him, hearing words I couldn't fully comprehend, terms like oxygen dropping and vitals unstable. I stumbled back, heart racing, as the reality of what I'd taken on crashed down upon me like a tidal wave. Had I just made the worst mistake of my life? I heard the monitors screaming, but not as loud as my heart. Medical staff burst into the room, their practiced hands moving swiftly over Grandpa's fragile body. Orders flew around like sparks, sharp and urgent. My world blurred as I stepped backward, barely able to stand, barely breathing. It felt like watching someone else's nightmare unfold, disconnected yet painfully aware of every dreadful moment. Time seemed frozen, but somehow the doctors pulled Grandpa back from the brink. His heartbeat steadied, the frantic beeping subsided into a rhythmic pulse, and I felt a shaky relief seep through my exhausted limbs. I sank into a chair by the window, my body suddenly heavy, depleted by days of adrenaline and worry. My eyes drifted shut for what felt like only a second, but when I jerked awake, morning sunlight was already filtering through the blinds. The soft glow illuminated Grandpa's peaceful, resting face. For one fleeting moment, I let myself feel relief. But that quickly vanished when my phone vibrated harshly in my pocket. I stared at the screen, recognizing my mother's number. My stomach tightened, hoping against reason she'd finally come to her senses, but the message was colder than any I had anticipated. "You're on your own. Don't expect anything from us." Before I could even respond, the notification read, "Sender has disconnected this number." A chill crept through my chest, lodging itself somewhere deep. I dialed back, desperately, but only reached a robotic voice confirming the disconnection. She'd just discarded me, tossed away like trash. I slumped back into the chair, my head spinning. Did my own mother just erase me from her life? The nurse came by a few hours later, handing me a thick envelope with a cautious expression. "Billing sent this up for you. You should probably look at it sooner rather than later," she said gently. I nodded numbly, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. My eyes scanned down, landing on a number that stole the breath from my lungs. $40,328.772. My vision blurred. I stumbled toward the corridor, leaning against the cold, sterile wall for support. The weight of abandonment pressed upon me so intensely, I felt physically crushed. I forced my lungs to pull in air, steadying my shaking hands. A harsh realization struck deep. My family hadn't just left. They'd erased every trace of me from their lives. The joint bank account my mother had insisted we open when I started college was closed without a word. Gone. It was as if I'd ceased to exist the moment I chose Grandpa over their paradise. For the first time since this nightmare began, tears flowed freely down my cheeks, not tears of sorrow, but of pure, helpless fury at being discarded so effortlessly. Standing there in that cold, impersonal hallway, I understood something I'd been ignoring for years. I'd been disposable all along. The days blurred together, each indistinguishable from the next. I learned quickly to ration the little money I had left. Every meal skipped was another pill paid for, another chance for Grandpa to wake up. Hunger became normal, exhaustion my constant companion. One night, halfway through mopping the pediatric wing's floors, I hid inside a storage closet, my face buried in the rough fabric of a cleaning rag, sobbing silently to avoid detection by the night supervisor. My chest ached from trying to silence my grief, my shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Through blurry eyes, I imagined my family lounging on sun-soaked beaches, laughing without care. The thought stung more deeply than hunger or fatigue ever could. Each afternoon, after finishing the day's grueling shift, I checked the hospital mailbox downstairs with a flicker of hope. Maybe today would bring a letter, an apology, or even just a note acknowledging my existence. But the mailbox mocked me, day after day, empty, hollow, indifferent. Eventually, I stopped checking, unable to bear the constant sting of disappointment. Late one evening, after emptying my wallet to cover another medication bill, I found myself wandering numbly toward Grandpa's room. The hospital hallways, once bustling, were quiet at this late hour. I slipped into the chair by his bed, my last $12 paid out for his comfort. The room felt colder tonight, shadows heavier, the dim glow from the hallway barely illuminating his face. In that moment, the world pressed down upon me with suffocating force, and I found myself whispering bitterly, "Maybe this is who I'm meant to be." Someone forgotten, insignificant, sacrificed without a second thought. A shadow behind brighter lives, destined for nothing more. The quiet of the room pressed in, amplifying my silent despair. Yet, somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered back, was this truly my fate? Or simply what I'd allowed others to convince me it was? I rubbed my eyes, weary beyond measure, and leaned closer to Grandpa. The room was deathly still. The monitors whispered softly in the background, consistent, steady, reassuring. For a heartbeat, everything seemed suspended, waiting. But then, I heard Grandpa's voice again. It was faint, almost a whisper, like a breeze gently moving through a silent room. "You stayed," he breathed, his eyelids fluttering open just enough to reveal those familiar, watery blue eyes. The words came slowly, softly, each syllable holding an ocean of meaning. I couldn't find words of my own at first. They lodged painfully in my throat. I nodded, swallowing the lump of emotion blocking my voice, and felt tears slip silently down my face. "You stayed," he repeated, the simple acknowledgement echoing gently within me. He didn't say thank you or question why. He didn't need to. Those 2 words were enough to bridge all the days of despair I'd been enduring alone. In the days that followed, I settled into a quiet routine beside Grandpa's hospital bed. Each evening, after long shifts spent cleaning corridors and scrubbing away my worries, I'd return, exhausted, to sit beside him. With little to talk about, I filled the silence with whatever reading material I could find, mostly IKEA manuals left in waiting areas, forgotten by weary relatives. Oddly enough, Grandpa seemed comforted by these strange bedtime stories. I'd read about assembling chairs, cabinets, and bookshelves, pausing occasionally to glance at him, watching for any tiny signs of recovery. Every small victory, like the gentle twitch of his fingers or the faintest upward curve of his lips, brought warmth back into my heart. They became proof in my tired mind that perhaps my decision hadn't been in vain. Each flicker of progress reminded me why I had stayed, despite the heavy cost. Yet, beneath this fragile sense of hope, another voice echoed relentlessly in my thoughts. It was my sister Callista's last message, delivered so calmly, so coldly, that it burned into my memory. "You chose this, Avon. Don't call us." Her words replayed endlessly, an uninvited guest in my mind, often surfacing in the quietest moments. Lying awake on the uncomfortable vinyl chair wrapped in a thin hospital blanket, I wondered if maybe Callista had a point. Had I truly chosen wrongly? Was it naive idealism or blind stubbornness that kept me here, instead of enjoying life with them under sunny Hawaiian skies? On particularly rough nights, as I drifted between wakefulness and uneasy sleep, I imagined sandy beaches and the soft crash of waves, the scent of sunscreen mingling with ocean spray. But then I'd glance at Grandpa's frail figure silhouetted against dim, blinking monitors, and guilt would wrap around my heart tighter than ever. One rainy evening, as clouds darkened the sky outside the hospital window and thunder rolled softly in the distance, I carefully spooned chicken broth into Grandpa's mouth. He swallowed slowly, then furrowed his brows and grumbled, "Too salty. You always overdo it." It took me by surprise. Laughter bubbled up through my chest, catching me off guard as fresh tears sprang to my eyes. After weeks of silence and heartache, that gentle complaint was the most wonderful sound I had heard in ages. My laughter filled the room, a bit too loud perhaps, but I didn't care. Grandpa's eyes twinkled weakly, joining mine for a brief, precious moment. He drifted off into a calm sleep soon afterward, his breathing steadier than I'd heard in days. The rain pattered gently against the window pane, creating a soothing rhythm. I sat back, listening to his slow, even breaths, and felt my shoulders finally relax, releasing some of the tension I hadn't realized I was holding. Yet even in that quiet peace, uncertainty hovered at the edges of my thoughts. My future was a thick fog, impenetrable and intimidating. The steady drip of IV fluids, the hum of distant machines, they were constant reminders of where I was and how much lay uncertain ahead. Glancing at the stack of bills piled neatly on the small bedside table, dread settled once more in the pit of my stomach. The reality I'd been avoiding could no longer be ignored. I had chosen to stay, but now what? I looked back at Grandpa's sleeping form, his expression serene, unburdened by the weight that pressed upon me. My mind drifted again to my family, likely sipping tropical drinks and watching sunsets. A sharp pang of resentment mixed with longing tore at my heart. They had discarded us both, and yet, somehow, they still occupied space in my mind, refusing to leave. I wondered briefly if they thought of us at all, or if we'd become a distant, inconvenient memory they could easily tuck away. Their betrayal was profound, yet oddly predictable, years of quiet neglect culminating in one devastating choice. With a sigh, I pushed those bitter thoughts aside, forcing my attention back to the present. I smoothed Grandpa's thinning hair gently, whispering softly into the quiet night, more for myself than anyone else. I stayed, but what now? The question hung unanswered, suspended in the silence around us, as the rain continued to whisper its gentle rhythm against the hospital window. Despite everything, I knew I'd never regret staying, even if I couldn't yet see the path ahead. Grandpa stirred slightly in his sleep, breathing softly. His presence reminded me that, despite everything, I wasn't entirely alone. And then came the bills I couldn't outrun. They arrived relentlessly, each envelope heavier than the last, pressing down on me until breathing itself felt exhausting. Standing at my battered kitchen table, I stared blankly at the latest statement, overdue and tinged ominously red, as if it were mocking my futile attempts at independence. The hospital logo loomed from the top corner, a silent accusation. 40,000 had ballooned into 75, and each digit seemed to pulse angrily, reminding me of the family who had cut me loose without a second thought. I'd taken a second job at a local diner, juggling early morning shifts, flipping pancakes, and evenings scrubbing hospital floors. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself, and meals even less so. Yet no matter how hard I pushed, the numbers kept spiraling out of control. The faint knock at my apartment door startled me from my despair. I shuffled wearily across the creaky wooden floor, half expecting another collector, but found Grandpa standing there instead, leaning against the doorframe, holding an old toolbox. "Grandpa, you shouldn't be out here alone," I scolded softly, helping him inside. "Nonsense, Avon. I can still walk. It's wiring you need help with." "Light switch flickers like a disco ball in here," he said, managing a weak chuckle as he eyed my dimly lit living room. Over the weeks, Grandpa had been quietly teaching me small home repairs, changing outlets, patching drywall, and troubleshooting plumbing. He encouraged me gently to offer these skills to neighbors for a little extra cash. "Charge them, Avon. Your time is valuable, even if your mother never realized it." His words carried a deeper meaning. Sometimes I caught him watching me intently, as though holding back something important. I felt there were layers to his guidance, lessons he was leaving me beyond mere survival. One cool evening, as I reattached the cover to a repaired outlet, Grandpa called me to sit beside him. "There's something you need to know, Avon," he began slowly, eyes distant. "After your father passed, I wrote my will clearly naming you my sole heir. I wanted you safe. Your mother, Celine, she's a storm wrapped in silk. But recently, something changed. I felt a chill seep into my bones, my voice barely a whisper. What do you mean, changed? I never altered my will. Grandpa's voice tightened. But after my last hospitalization, the lawyers showed me a different one. It names your mother as sole heir. But Avon, I swear to you, I never authorized that. My stomach churned as his words sank in. Celine, my own mother, could she have actually forged Grandpa's will? The betrayal hit like ice-cold water. Suddenly all my exhaustion made sense. This wasn't just abandonment, it was strategic erasure. Later, unable to sleep, I flipped through news headlines on my phone, hoping to distract myself from Grandpa's revelation. Instead, an image of my mother's carefully practiced smile greeted me on the screen, framed by ribbons and cheers. Celine Calder, visionary founder of SafeEep Clinics, the headline read. SafeEep, Grandpa's community outreach project, the one he spent decades developing. My blood turned to ice as I scrolled further, realizing the horrifying truth. They weren't merely after money. They had hijacked his entire legacy, twisted it into a glossy PR campaign, elevating Celine's public image. Photos showed her elegantly cutting ribbons at SafeEep's grand openings. Each picture drove the blade deeper into my chest. I had scrubbed floors to keep Grandpa alive, while she reaped praise and accolades for a project she once sneered at. In a nauseating rush, memories resurfaced. Celine mocking Grandpa's idealism over family dinners, saying things like, "His charity cases won't buy us a better lifestyle, honey." Yet now, here she was, holding microphones, smiling at cameras, accepting praise for work she'd mocked privately. It was like watching a perfectly executed theft unfold in plain sight. Anger and grief tangled violently inside me. This wasn't about losing inheritance. This was about losing my identity, Grandpa's dignity, everything we stood for. I felt dizzy, collapsing into the worn armchair beside Grandpa's sleeping form, burying my face in shaking hands. They'd stolen him from me, and now, piece by ruthless piece, they were erasing me too. Grandpa stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering open briefly. He mumbled softly, sensing my distress. "Avon?" "I'm here, Grandpa," I said gently, fighting to steady my voice. "You're stronger than all of them combined," he murmured faintly, his words slurred yet clear in their intent. "Don't let her rewrite our story." "I won't," I promised, though my heart trembled with uncertainty. Could I truly fight someone like Celine? Could I salvage Grandpa's legacy when my world seemed determined to bury me beneath insurmountable obstacles? That night, sleep eluded me entirely. I paced silently across the apartment, racked by anxious thoughts. Outside, the distant city hummed obliviously beneath a veil of neon lights, indifferent to my turmoil. The morning arrived drearily, carrying another hospital bill. As I tore it open, the paper trembled in my fingers, my eyes blurring from exhaustion and despair. Through tears, I whispered bitterly, acknowledging the painful truth aloud for the first time. It's never been about money. It's always been about erasure. Exhaustion overcame me, but I knew this was far from over. They had pushed me to the brink, robbed me blind, and now threatened the only thing I had left, Grandpa's truth. I stood silently beside his bed, my fingers brushing his papery thin hand. "They stole you from me," I whispered, swallowing back bitter grief. "And now, they're trying to erase who I am too." My throat tightened. The magnitude of their betrayal felt almost overwhelming, yet strangely, clarity emerged from my pain. Perhaps this realization was the catalyst I needed, the spark that would finally ignite the fire in my veins to reclaim what was rightfully ours. I didn't know how or when, but one truth remained unshakable. I would not allow Celine's false legacy to stand. Grandpa's story was mine to protect, and I would fight for it, no matter the cost. I thought I'd already hit rock bottom. But then, Grandpa died. I found him early that morning, still sitting upright in his worn armchair, a faint, peaceful expression etched across his lined face. His hand, cold yet gentle, still cradled the Safip prototype we had built together. A numbness spread through me, hollowing me out, robbing me of tears. I sat next to him, utterly still, as dawn filtered softly through the apartment window, casting long shadows over the only person who had ever truly seen me. Paramedics arrived with sympathetic faces and quiet condolences, but the rest of the day passed in a disconnected blur. I couldn't help but overhear their hushed words as they removed him. "At least he didn't suffer long," someone whispered, but I wanted to scream back, "You have no idea." Celine handled all funeral arrangements remotely from wherever she was now, presumably still sunning herself in luxury. On the morning of the funeral, I stood quietly at the entrance, handing out printed programs she'd ordered. My throat tightened painfully as I scanned the glossy booklet. My mother's name, bold, elegant letters, stood proudly alongside my sister's under the grand title, Beloved Family and Founders. My name was nowhere. A wave of nausea hit me as mourners filed past, offering polite nods and whispered sympathies. I felt invisible, erased, like a ghost haunting my own grandfather's memorial. Just as I was about to step outside to catch my breath, my phone vibrated urgently. Celine's latest Facebook update flashed across the screen, a carefully curated photograph of her clutching Grandpa's framed picture, eyes shimmering artfully. "Goodbye to my beloved father," the post began. "I was always at your side, every step of the way." The hypocrisy stung deeply, my breath hitching at the sight of endless comments praising her devotion. "He was lucky to have you," wrote one acquaintance. Another added, "You did everything you could." I stared blankly, feeling the painful sting of betrayal yet again. The irony wasn't lost on me. Celine had been oceans away, lounging on tropical beaches, leaving me alone to bear the weight of Grandpa's final days. Yet here she was, effortlessly twisting the narrative, claiming credit for a sacrifice she'd never made. At the reception afterward, held in the sterile hall of a funeral home, I lingered quietly by the wall, watching the distant, emotionless faces around me. An older woman, a long-time acquaintance of Grandpa's, approached me hesitantly. "Oh dear," she murmured gently, eyes sympathetic yet distant. "Were you one of his nurses?" The question hit like a slap, but I managed a faint, exhausted smile. "Something like that," I whispered. Correcting her felt pointless now. After all, maybe she was right. I had been reduced to staff, invisible help, someone paid no mind. Celine's voice echoed clearly in my mind, cold and detached. "You're on your own." Each syllable sliced deep, reinforcing the chilling isolation that had become my new normal. Without thinking, I slipped quietly out the door, leaving the crowded room behind. Fresh air greeted me harshly, and I began to walk without any destination, letting the busy streets of San Diego absorb my grief. I wandered for hours, letting the bustling traffic and anonymous crowds blur into insignificance. The city was indifferent, busy with its own problems, blind to my unraveling. My phone buzzed several times, probably from the hospital's billing department, but I ignored it. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with each step, my body aching from exhaustion, both physical and emotional. As dusk settled gently over the city, I finally made my way home, each step heavier than the last. The apartment felt unbearably empty. The silence seemed to mock my loneliness, and I sank onto the old sofa, closing my eyes in weary defeat. Then, in the muted twilight, I noticed an envelope tucked beneath a pile of unopened bills. Its edges were worn from handling, Grandpa's familiar handwriting scrawled across it in faded ink, my name spelled out tenderly. To my dear Avon. My hands trembled as I picked it up, heart thumping unevenly. How had I missed this? When had he written it? My fingers traced the letters, imagining his careful, deliberate strokes. Yet I hesitated. The fear of uncovering another painful revelation held me back, freezing me in place. I couldn't bear another betrayal, another erasure. It seemed easier to leave it sealed, untouched, preserved. Yet curiosity and hope whispered softly, nudging me to find out if maybe, just maybe, Grandpa had foreseen this moment, had tried to shield me from this agony. But exhaustion won, numbing my resolve. My grip relaxed, letting the envelope drop gently onto the coffee table. My voice was barely audible, hollow and resigned. Maybe another day. I curled up on the sofa, ignoring hunger, ignoring pain, ignoring everything. I stared unseeing at the ceiling, feeling utterly depleted. The family I'd lost, the legacy stolen from me. And now Grandpa, gone forever. My life felt like a fading echo, diminished to nothingness. I had reached my breaking point, and silence was my only refuge. It enveloped me, offering a cold, distant comfort. Sleep eluded me again, replaced by endless loops of regret and what-ifs. Had I failed him? Had I failed myself? The sun rose mercilessly the next morning, indifferent to my despair. I stood up stiffly, moving mechanically through routine chores. As I reached again for Grandpa's letter, my phone buzzed insistently, its screen illuminating the dim room. A text from an unknown number read simply, "We're back. Expect us soon." My stomach twisted violently, a familiar dread settling over me. The words were cryptic, yet clear. Celine and my sister were returning, no doubt ready to claim their prize, to erase me further. My heart raced, anxiety and anger churning into a quiet storm within me. My eyes shifted again to the unopened letter. A new resolve took root, stubborn and small. They had taken nearly everything, but this letter, his words, they were mine alone. This time, I wouldn't wait. I had lost enough. And then, they returned. Standing at the back of the funeral home, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. My mother, Celine, walked in wearing a designer outfit, oversized sunglasses perched casually on her head as if she'd just stepped off a private jet rather than into her own father's funeral. My sister trailed behind, her gaze detached, scrolling lazily through her phone. They moved through the gathered mourners like tourists lost in an unfamiliar city, pausing occasionally to flash superficial smiles. When Celine spotted me, she opened her arms dramatically, her perfume wafting ahead of her like a cloud. "Oh, sweetheart," she purred, the words dripping with artificial sweetness. "It's been far too long." 7 years of silence, and she called it too long, as if time alone could erase abandonment. I remained stiff, my voice flat. "Hello, Celine." She laughed softly, the sound polished and hollow. "Is that any way to greet your mother?" "I wouldn't know," I replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "Haven't had much practice lately." She brushed off my comment with practiced ease. "Let's not be bitter today. It's disrespectful to your grandfather." "Disrespectful," I echoed quietly, the words sticking painfully in my throat. She had left him in a hospital bed, choosing a tropical vacation over his life, and now dared speak of respect. Once the service ended, Celine cornered me near the entrance, her manicured nails tapping gently on my shoulder. Her voice lowered conspiratorially, as though sharing some secret between friends. "We should discuss the estate. It's important we're fair." "Fair?" I turned to face her directly, unable to hide my disgust. "You left him alone to die." She waved off the accusation as if shooing away an insect. "Oh, stop being dramatic. We had obligations, commitments, and besides," she added coolly, "you're still his granddaughter. We're his children. It's only natural the estate goes to us." My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to shake her by the shoulders until reality dawned in her perfectly coiffed head, but I held it together. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. "Natural," I murmured. "Right." She reached into her handbag, pulling out a folded check. "Here," she said, pressing it into my palm. "A little something to ease your troubles." Glancing down, I felt my heart sink further. The check was generous, but it was made out to Evelyn Calder. I stared at the unfamiliar name, bitterness filling me anew. After everything, they still didn't know my name. Wordlessly, I handed it back. Celine stared at me, her expression unreadable for a moment, before slipping the check back into her bag. "Suit yourself," she said icily. "Just remember, I tried." The lawyer's call later that afternoon felt like the universe's cruel sense of humor. "Ms. Calder, the will reading is scheduled for tomorrow morning. When would you like to come?" "The earliest slot, please," I said quickly, cutting off any possibility of Celine beating me to the punch. And just me, alone. That evening, back in my tiny apartment, I sank onto my sofa, clutching Grandpa's old pocket watch. The ticking felt louder tonight, a steady reminder of everything slipping away. I stared at the watch's worn brass face, tracing the familiar scratches left by years of Grandpa's gentle touch. I felt drained, empty, questioning myself again. Am I about to lose even him? The apartment felt colder now, emptier than before. I pulled a threadbare blanket around my shoulders, desperate for comfort that never came. I whispered softly, eyes closed, the watch pressed to my chest. "Please, Grandpa, tell me you didn't leave me too." Sleep refused to come, my mind looping through memories. Images of Grandpa's kind eyes, his quiet laugh, his reassuring voice during our long hospital nights flooded me. Every detail a reminder of the bond we'd forged, the bond now threatened by paperwork and legal formalities. Dawn arrived without mercy, a pale gray creeping through my window, The city stirred outside, indifferent to my turmoil. I dressed quickly, mechanically, each movement slow and deliberate, as if prolonging the inevitable could change the outcome. The lawyer's office was modest, tucked away in a quiet corner of downtown San Diego, a stark contrast to the lavishness Celine always craved. The receptionist greeted me politely, showing me to a simple waiting room. I sat rigidly, hands clasped tightly in my lap, heartbeat quickening with every passing second. Anxiety twisted inside me, whispering harsh possibilities. What if Grandpa had changed his mind? What if somehow, after everything, Celine still won? The lawyer appeared promptly, offering a professional nod. "Ms. Calder, thank you for arriving early. This won't take long." I followed him into a small conference room, its walls lined with thick legal texts, air heavy with the scent of stale coffee. The silence hung thick as he shuffled through documents. I stared at his hands, willing him to hurry, yet dreading the words he would speak. He cleared his throat, eyes gentle yet distant. "Your grandfather's wishes were quite specific." I swallowed hard, nodding faintly. "Please," I managed to whisper, barely audible. "Just tell me." He opened the folder slowly, the sound of papers rustling deafening in the quiet. I gripped Grandpa's watch tightly beneath the table, the cool metal my only anchor. The lawyer's voice was calm, but his words struck deep. And the next morning, the will spoke. I sat in the lawyer's waiting room, my fingers clasped tightly around Grandpa's pocket watch, its ticking the only sound breaking the sterile silence. The watch felt heavier now, its rhythmic pulse echoing through my palm, anchoring me to reality. I took slow, steady breaths, fighting down waves of nausea that churned my stomach. This was it, the moment that would confirm whether my loyalty had mattered, or if my mother had managed to manipulate even this. Celine breezed in, my sister trailing behind, both dressed impeccably, their smiles wide and expectant. They entered with a sense of entitlement so natural it seemed woven into their very being. Celine cast me a sideways glance, her smile faltering briefly. "Well, look who's here," she said softly, voice sugary yet sharp. "Ready to hear the good news, sweetheart?" I remained silent, refusing to play her game. Her laughter, smooth as silk and twice as false, filled the waiting area. "Don't be nervous, darling. We're family. Family always comes first." The lawyer's assistant stepped out and beckoned us inside. I rose, straightened my dress, and entered the conference room, my heart hammering relentlessly in my chest. I settled quietly, my hands folded on the table, my posture calm, but inside, my thoughts raced. The lawyer cleared his throat. "We have a recorded video testimony from Mr. Calder that serves as his official will." He dimmed the lights, and a screen flickered to life. Grandpa's face appeared, older, tired, yet the gentle spark in his eyes was unmistakable. My breath caught painfully in my throat. "To those who left me," Grandpa began, his voice clear and calm, eyes unwavering, "I leave nothing." Celine stiffened, the blood draining from her face. My sister glanced toward our mother nervously, confusion clouding her carefully masked expression. "To the one who stayed, everything," Grandpa continued softly. "My entire estate, all shares of the family business, and full rights to Safeep. I leave to my granddaughter, Avon Calder." The lawyer paused the video and nodded toward me solemnly. Ms. Calder, you are the sole inheritor of Mr. Calder's assets, as explicitly stated. I sat frozen, ears ringing, the weight of Grandpa's words crashing over me. Everything. He left me everything. My heartbeat roared in my ears, a strange mix of relief, vindication, and profound sadness swirling through me. Celine rose sharply, her eyes blazing. "This is outrageous! You can't do this! She manipulated him! He wasn't in his right mind!" "Mrs. Calder," the lawyer interrupted firmly, "your father underwent multiple cognitive assessments confirming his complete mental clarity. All medical documentation has been filed accordingly." Celine trembled with barely restrained fury, her manicured fingers gripping the table edge as though she might shatter it. "This can't stand," she spat. "We'll contest this." The lawyer raised a calm hand. "I should also inform you of the no contest clause. Any attempt to challenge this will immediately revoke your eligibility to inherit even a single penny. You'd lose everything." The color drained fully from Celine's face, her mouth opening and closing silently. She sank back into her chair, defeated, for perhaps the first time in her life. My sister watched silently, her phone forgotten on her lap. "Shall we continue?" The lawyer resumed the video. Grandpa's image returned, and his voice softened. He gazed into the camera, directly into my soul. "Avon, you gave me 7 extra years. You gave me life. For that, my dear girl, this legacy is yours alone." The screen faded to black, leaving silence heavy in the air. Tears stung my eyes, blurring the room. Grandpa's words echoed endlessly inside me. "You gave me life." Celine abruptly stood, knocking her chair backward. Her face contorted with suppressed rage, humiliation evident in every line of her perfectly made-up face. She fixed me with a final, venomous glare, voice trembling slightly. "You think this is over?" Without waiting for my answer, she spun on her heels and strode from the room, her steps sharp and brittle. My sister trailed after her, avoiding eye contact as though ashamed, or perhaps merely uncomfortable. The lawyer handed me paperwork to sign, his manner professional yet kind. "Congratulations, Ms. Calder. I know your grandfather would be proud." Proud. It felt strange hearing that word, after years of invisibility, dismissal, and silent sacrifice. I nodded numbly, signed the documents, and exited into the sunshine that felt oddly distant, its warmth barely penetrating the chill that had settled inside me. That evening, alone in my modest apartment, I held Grandpa's watch close, its ticking now soothing in the heavy silence. My phone buzzed incessantly with messages from distant family and acquaintances, each one a hollow congratulations or veiled request. I ignored them all, my thoughts tangled and weary. A sharp knock startled me from my reverie. I opened the door cautiously. Celine stood there, her expression deceptively calm, voice low and controlled. "You won," she said simply. "For now." I didn't respond, studying her carefully. She leaned in slightly, eyes narrowed, her voice a cold whisper. "But remember, sweetheart, the higher you climb, the further you'll fall." She turned abruptly, leaving me standing in the doorway, heart pounding, dread and defiance warring within me. "It wasn't over," I whispered softly, shutting the door. "Not yet." The days following the will reading were a whirlwind of stares, whispers, and tense conversations behind closed doors. As the new CEO of SafeEap, I found myself thrust into the spotlight. but beneath the polite nods and handshakes, I could sense an unspoken tension. Celine's cold parting words replayed in my mind endlessly. I knew she wouldn't simply fade away. There was still a storm brewing. Exactly 1 week later, I stood backstage at a highly publicized corporate event in downtown San Diego. The auditorium buzzed with anticipation, filled with stakeholders, media, and curious spectators who knew the Calder name all too well. Celine was already on stage, effortlessly charming the audience with practiced smiles and subtle digs at my supposed inexperience. "We must be careful," she intoned smoothly. "Trust and integrity have always been cornerstones of SAFEEP." A cold knot formed in my chest. Something was off, deeply wrong. Then it happened. A staffer hurriedly handed me a phone, eyes avoiding mine. I played the audio clip circulating rapidly online, and my blood ran cold. My voice, yet not mine, echoed back accusingly. The audio painted a vicious picture, me coercing Grandpa into rewriting the will, even threatening him subtly. It was expertly forged, every syllable twisted against me. I recognized Celine's handiwork instantly. The board's messages flooded my inbox, each demanding urgent meetings, explanations, answers. I stared blankly at the small screen, feeling the weight of betrayal crush me. "How could she?" I whispered, numbness spreading through my limbs. I gave him 7 years. 7. Hours blurred into each other. I withdrew emotionally, retreating to my modest apartment, curtains drawn tight against the world's judgment. Doubt gnawed relentlessly. Was I truly the manipulator Celine portrayed? Had Grandpa's love blinded him? In the deafening silence, I recalled Grandpa's watch, its rhythmic ticking anchoring me once more. Gathering my strength, I opened the old letter Grandpa left unopened, my fingers trembling. Inside, his familiar handwriting stared back. "Wind the watch. Keep going." A simple command, yet powerful enough to break through my despair. Grandpa's quiet resolve filled me with new determination. He hadn't faltered in the face of hardship. Neither would I. Over the next days, I gathered every piece of evidence, medical records, cognitive assessments, Grandpa's handwritten notes, and his unedited video message, each document carefully organized, undeniable proof of my innocence. I knew Celine wouldn't see this coming. Her arrogance had always blinded her to the possibility of defeat. The evening of SAFEEP's next major event arrived swiftly. A calmness settled over me as I stepped confidently onto the auditorium stage. Murmurs erupted throughout the audience, hundreds of eyes bored into me skeptically. Celine sat in the front row, smirking slightly as though expecting my surrender. I took a steady breath, met her gaze head-on, and began. "Recently, accusations have been made against me. I believe you deserve the truth, the complete truth." Behind me, Grandpa's video filled the massive screen, his strong voice resonating clearly. My decision to leave everything to Avon was mine alone. "She is my granddaughter, and she stood by me when no one else did." The crowd fell silent, rapt attention glued to the screen. Next, I displayed the medical assessments certifying Grandpa's lucidity, his handwritten letters to me, filled with gratitude and trust. Document after document appeared, shattering Celine's carefully woven narrative. I continued calmly, without anger or dramatics, letting facts speak louder than lies. Integrity isn't something one claims, it's something proven through action. As the presentation ended, a heavy, condemning silence engulfed Celine. The auditorium filled with a palpable judgment, hundreds of eyes turning slowly toward her. She stood abruptly, pale and humiliated, fury barely contained. No one spoke. No one stopped her as she stormed from the room, dignity collapsing under the weight of truth. I walked off stage quietly, my pulse steadying, my breathing deep and calm. A few scattered applause began, building slowly into a respectful, affirming ovation. Yet inside I felt no triumph, just quiet relief. I had survived this assault, but the scars would linger. Alone, backstage, I whispered softly, reminding myself, I didn't win. I survived. But survival was enough. For now. Each morning at precisely 7 o'clock, I found comfort in winding Grandpa's old pocket watch. It had evolved from a grief-stricken routine into a quiet vow to honor his memory. As the gentle ticking filled the silence of my modest home, I felt an inner peace, a silent strength forged from loss and endurance. 6 months had passed since the chaos at Safeep. The headlines faded. Social media had moved on, chasing fresher scandals. Life returned to something resembling normalcy, not the normal I once knew, but a new, kinder one I'd built with my own hands. Under my quiet guidance, Safeep transformed from a profit-driven business into something meaningful, the Green Foundation. Using Grandpa's generous legacy, I restructured the company to fund community programs dedicated to abandoned youth and neglected elderly, a far cry from what Celine had envisioned. This foundation wasn't about public image or inflated egos, it was about genuine care for those society forgot. One afternoon, I visited the community center downtown. A handful of teenagers crowded around, eager to learn wiring and repairs, skills Grandpa patiently taught me so many years ago. "Why do you do all this?" asked Emma, a girl of 16 with eyes far older than they should be. Her voice carried a quiet skepticism, a hardness shaped by broken promises. "Because someone once did it for me," I replied softly, my voice filled with honest reflection. Emma's guarded eyes softened slightly as understanding passed silently between us. She nodded, returning her attention to the circuit board, a small smile appearing on her lips. Walking home, the fading daylight cast long shadows across the familiar streets of San Diego. The wounds inflicted by my family hadn't healed entirely. I doubted they ever fully would, but I'd found clarity in accepting what I lost, in letting go of bitterness and resentment. It wasn't victory, it was simply peace. Entering my small house, I paused to glance at Grandpa's framed photograph on the mantel. His gentle, knowing smile reassured me each evening as I returned home from the foundation. I missed him deeply, yet somehow he felt ever present. As I prepared dinner, my phone buzzed quietly. My sister's name flashed on the screen. The first contact in months. Curiosity overcame hesitation as I opened her message. "I'm sorry. Maybe someday we'll talk again." A faint ache touched my chest. Not bitterness, but a gentle sorrow. Perhaps someday, but not today. I'd learned forgiveness didn't mean forgetting, nor returning to old patterns of hurt. That night, sitting alone at the dining table, I held Grandpa's watch, observing its polished surface reflecting dim lamplight. It was more than a family heirloom. It had become an emotional anchor, a reminder of perseverance. The ticking filled the quiet room, resonating softly through the emptiness. I didn't build a company, I whispered, feeling a calm clarity. I built a life. As I tidied up, preparing for bed, I allowed myself a quiet moment of reflection. In the silence, memories surfaced: the hospital nights, the cruel betrayal, Celine's harsh laughter, the media frenzy. Each pain, each loss had carved me into someone stronger, someone who understood the value of choosing to stay when others walked away. That quiet strength was my victory. I glanced toward Grandpa's picture again, feeling gratitude bloom warmly inside. His legacy was alive, not in money or influence, but in the simple act of compassion he had inspired within me. Before sleep overtook me, I held the watch tightly, closing its protective cover, whispering softly, "Tomorrow I wind it again." To those of you listening, I offer a humble truth born of hardship and quiet triumph. Sometimes staying isn't weakness, it's strength. And someday you too might see it mattered far more than you ever realized.